So this is a prequel to a talk that I gave in April of 2025. The main talk was called What's the Deal? It's about the Square Deal, the New Deal, and the Great Society, and that will be in a different link. I had prepared to do a really quick talk about tariffs beforehand, but with all the news about President Trump's on again, off again tariffs and what nations he granted and which nations he didn't grant and everything else that surrounds that, I just felt like anybody who was in the news would probably already know about that. So I explained to the audience that was there that even though I had prepared this, I would skip over it. After the talk is all over, I've decided that this is probably a good idea to do anyway. On the website here, History with Dave, this is what I'm calling a plus session. So this is a little session that will repeat. There will be other plus sessions, and they are not necessarily things. In fact, they will not be things that are discussed in the open forum, but rather things that come in the times in the weeks between the months, because I only give that talk once a month. So for a long time, the United States of America, like many other countries in the late 18th and through the 19th century, had tariffs. A tariff is basically a tax on a product that comes from another country. The purpose of the tariffs in our early days, in the fledgling stage, the days when we were trying to become a nation among nations so that we would be taken seriously, Tariffs were erected so that the United States economy would be protected against cheap products while the citizens of the United States created industry. This is one of the major purposes of tariffs, to protect the industry inside of a country as it develops, as it creates, and as it kind of figures out how it's going to do and what it's going to be. And so that's one of the purposes here, to protect industry within the country. A second common reason for a tariff is to protect the agriculture within that same country. So that, for example, in the 19th century, the British eventually found a way to grow cotton in India and in Egypt. And with the successful agricultural product of cotton, they could have easily undermined cotton from this country. So that's the second reason, to make sure that other countries don't come in and undermine the farming society that's in the host country. And then of course, since there's a fee paid as things come in the country, that's part of what funds the government. In the 19th century, before there were any social services in the United States, tariffs, along with alcohol taxes, that was the major tax on American citizens from the very beginning, when Alexander Hamilton set up the system of finances that we have. So the other purpose is to fund the host government. Now, as I stated just a moment ago there, early American tariffs in the early 18th century and all the way through the 19th century, designed to bolster American growth. Part of the reason was because the industrial revolution, the way that everybody virtually does business now, the big factories being able to produce things at a low price, started in Britain in the late 18th century. It started in the textile industry, started as easy as machines to card wool, and then machines to take the carded wool and turn it into thread, eventually then to automate using water wheels, to automate the process of making broadcloth. And it was that production of mass producing broadcloth that you would then turn into shirts and jeans and flags and anything else that you might use a textile product with. The cost, the industrial production of cloth undermined the cost that a homemaker or a domestic marketplace could produce those things. And so, of course, if you want homespun cloth in the America, the major product here, of course, would be cotton, especially after Eli Whitney invents the cotton gin, which is easily reproducible and allows a hand mechanized way to pull the seeds out of cotton so that it can then be carded, turned into thread, and then cloth really, really cheaply. It assured, high tariffs assured that American cotton would go to Britain without having to worry about competing with British products here. Now, it wasn't very long after the Industrial Revolution started that Americans who were essentially Englishmen on a foreign shore, they got a look at what was going on there. In fact, Alexander Hamilton saw a look at the capitalization of industry and the beginnings of that and decided that the United States not only had the means to replicate that, but they had a responsibility to do that. And so very early on, Americans are starting to duplicate that system so much that the textile factory and the way that it was made, some Americans paid for one of the Englishmen to come over, and he essentially duplicated the mill that he had been working in. And of course, the end result here is that if imported goods are cheaper than goods made in the country, then people always vote with their wallets, and the consequence is that foreign products will be purchased over domestic products. And once again, the purpose of a tariff in this case is to make sure that the home country, the United States, had room to grow industrial manufacturing, the factory system, and then eventually be able to compete with Britain. Now, there's a couple of important things. I alluded to a few of these, and we just want to move through here. Number one, it's true that the federal government was primarily funded by alcohol taxes and tariffs. Alcohol taxes date, in fact, both of these date from the very beginning. Hamilton takes a look at the ineffectiveness of a federal government, and along with Washington and Madison and the whole continental, the constitutional convention, they create a strong central government, but they need a way to fund it. And these are the two primary ways it's done. Now, when we talk about funding the government, we have to kind of step back from the government that we know now, because this government of the 19th century and the late 18th century has essentially no social services. There's no social security, old age pension. There's no way for the government to monitor products or food or anything else. Any merchantman, any manufacturer could claim how a product was made or the things that were in the product. And there was no government agency. There was no way to confirm that they were actually truth tellers. The same thing is true as the 19th century grows the industrialization of America after the Civil War. Working conditions are extremely hazardous. And the only way that the government will eventually start to monitor that things like an 8-hour workday, requirement of overtime under certain conditions, safety conditions either on the railroad or inside a factory. Those things only happen when the government, which is neutral, sends out inspectors to review what the companies say they're doing, and then have the ability to either break up monopolies, induce fines, or in some other way guarantee that what the laws say actually happens. Now, tariffs were reduced and then eventually eliminated with the upcoming crisis of World War I. And in fact, the first time that there's an income tax is during the Civil War, where Abraham Lincoln imposes a tax for a short time during the war, but that tax goes away. The tax that we have now started in 1913, the Underwood-Sherman's Act. As you can tell from the name, it was done in cooperation with Congress. And while there have been adjustments made to taxes and brackets and how much we pay and who pays it and all that kind of thing, today's income tax structure started in 1913, and it has continued ever since. Now, as I mentioned, this tax started when World War I started, the Great War Part A, as I like to call it. And the reason why is because Washington needed another source of income as we ramped up. Now, at this point, tariffs didn't work because the United States was lending both money and selling material to both sides of the conflict. Of course, each of the sides, the Central Powers and the Allied powers, were destroying the other side's ability to continue their economy while they were mass murdering massive amounts of men on the eastern, western, and southern fronts. The revenue stream from the tariffs before the war were replaced with this wartime income tax that I just talked about. Now, at this point, by the time the war is over, it's become obvious to everybody that the United States, since they hold the banknotes from loaning money to all of the powers in the conflict, and since all the conflict countries purchase material from the U.S., from clothing to bullets to armaments to food to everything, it's become obvious to everybody that the biggest economic power on the planet is no longer Britain or Germany, but it is now the United States of America. Now, the U.S., through things that happened in the late 19th century, but then becoming obvious during the war, leads the world in these couple of places in production of steel, thanks to Andrew Carnegie, and by this time U.S. Steel, in automobiles and other hard goods like appliances. You probably own or know the names Westinghouse, Frigidaire, General Electric, or GE. You know about American cars, Ford, that completely changed the landscape of how cars are made, so the price got cheap enough that everybody could purchase one. You know about Chevrolet and about all these other places. So tariffs at this point, which are paid by the end user, tariffs at this point mostly disappear, although in selected areas tariffs remain and have remained for a long, long time. If you are a person who was born in the 40s, 50s, or early 60s, you probably remember when in those days the company was known as Datsun, when Datsun and Toyota and a couple of other Japanese firms came in, undercut the price of American cars. Not only the prices, but the quality was much higher. And as a consequence, in the 70s, high tariffs were erected to protect American car companies while they figured out how to compete because the product wasn't as good. But my point here is that if a Datsun car was $2,000 when a Chevrolet was $2,500, then the government tariff would be maybe $700, making a Datsun $2,700 and the Chevrolet remaining at $2,500. Now you remember I said a couple of moments ago that people's wallets, people vote with their wallets. And so the idea was an American car being cheaper, even though the quality maybe wasn't so good, the gas mileage was a long ways away. Nonetheless, you would spend the $2,500. Now, part of what I want to say here is that the government, when they collect the tariff, they have no responsibility and seldom any thought about what they do with the tariff. Do they give a rebate to the citizen, so that when you buy an American car, you get to, there's no thought of that. The tariffs are collected by the government, and the government gets to do whatever they want to with it. Tariffs, then, are not centered on the consumer, but rather tariffs are centered on the business. A tariff is not erected to protect the consumer, is what I'm trying to say. A tariff is erected to protect a business so it can continue to operate. And of course, then the businesses do whatever they do with the profits and all of that. Now, before we end here, I want to just do a really quick reminder that in the late 18th and 19th centuries, when tariffs are the way the government is funded, there are essentially no social services. There's no aid to families with dependent children. There's no aid to deaf and dumb, not speaking children. There's no help for old age pension. There's no Medicare. There's no FDA, there's no EPA, there's no guarantee for clean water. In fact, that's why the EPA exists in the first place, because businesses polluted the air and the water so bad. You might remember the story of the Love Canal, or you might even remember the book Silent Spring by Rachel Carson, which was about DDT, its overuse, and how it was killing the environment. None of that happens in the tariff age. All of that happens as the Congress, the president, and the country figure out what it is we're supposed to do to become a citizen-centered government instead of a business-centered government. As I end here, I just want to leave you with this little phrase that I've used multiple times in my live talks, and that is that self-regulation results in non-compliance. Because of course a business is going to say they're doing everything right, even though Upton Sinclair showed us in The Jungle that the meat had anything in it, not just what it said. All beef hot dogs would be who knows what hot dogs, and a lot of toxin, a lot of elixirs were just snake oil. Whatever the person decided to put in it, they put in it without concern with if there was cocaine in it, like early Coca-Cola, no concern about the lasting effects. Tariffs are business-centered, and self-regulation results in non-compliance. So as we return to tariffs in the 21st century, my encouragement to you is to dig a little deeper. Go find some economists. I'm not an economist. This isn't economics with Dave, but rather history with Dave. Find some economists who know what they're talking about. Find some sources that are reliable, and read up or listen up or whatever your preferred method is about tariffs, so that you can understand what they're really about and what they're not about. Well, that'll wrap up this session, this plus session. Once again, our little thing about tariffs is a plus session to the live session I did called "What's the Deal?"